Really interesting article out in Think Progress about synthetic marijuana. They say the following, quote, "Years after states banned its use, health officials across the United States are mulling over how to best combat the surge in hospitalizations, calls to poison control centers, and deaths from brands of what consumers describe as synthetic marijuana. In the month of April, more than 1,000 people reported sicknesses from the substance, more than double the cases that the American Association of Poison Control Centers reported between January and March of this year. The cases, which have quadrupled compared to 2014, often involve synthetic marijuana that's been mixed with other substances." They continue, "Health departments in Alabama, Mississippi, and New York recently issued warnings amid increases in hospital admissions from synthetic marijuana users experiencing psychotic episodes, seizures, severe anxiety, muscle spasms, and suicidal thoughts. Similar cases have occurred in Arizona, Florida, New Jersey, and Texas. Health officials in Mississippi reported more than 400 hospital room visits this month. In Louisiana, one synthetic marijuana user has died, and 2 others are currently in intensive care. The chemical components of synthetic marijuana, which has been on the market since 2008, mimic the effects of marijuana when sprayed onto an herbal base material. Officials believe the most popular brands, including K2 and Spice, originate from a Chinese manufacturer. The product contains synthetic cannabinoids that don't fall under the classification that makes marijuana illegal. Producers of synthetic marijuana have evaded the Food and Drug Administration." Yeah, that about sums it up right there. Just that last line that I read there. Producers of synthetic marijuana have evaded the Food and Drug Administration. Yeah, well, that's probably the only problem here. When you don't have regulation, when you don't have the FDA coming in there and making sure that everything complies and is safe, what's going to happen? They're making it underground in an illegal market, in a black market, and naturally, they might end up cutting it with some poisonous stuff or using the wrong chemicals or whatever, and there's some bad batches and people can die or get sick, as happened. So they also go on to explain in the article here how people only take synthetic marijuana because marijuana is illegal. People only take it, for example, because they're afraid of the drug test that they get at work, but they want to get high, so they're like, fuck it, I'll take the synthetic kind because that won't show up on the test. And then they're taking a drug that's much more harmful for them when they do that. So yet again, here's another example, or another story, I should say, where the answer is more freedom. This is another issue where the answer is more freedom. If you legalize marijuana and you tax it and you regulate it, you're going to take all of the dangerous drugs are going to be off the market. And by the way, this doesn't just go for marijuana and synthetic marijuana. This goes for drugs across the board. Like one of the main drugs that people were fear-mongering about recently, with good reason, is this drug called crocodile, which is basically the poor man's heroin. So it's much cheaper, and it's made with shit that's much worse for you. And it just so happens that you may get an intense opiate-like high when you take it, but there are some downsides, like your skin melts off. And I forget the numbers, but it's something insanely high, like 80% or 90% of people die within 2 years of starting to take it. They get hooked on it, and then their fucking flesh just rots off. Okay, understand that that drug would not exist if opiates were legal. Again, counterintuitive, but stop and think about it. Because opiates are illegal, therefore everybody's got to buy, by definition, on the black market. Therefore, there is no regulation, and they could come up with really unsafe, bad products that are cheap substitutes. In a market where it's legal, taxed, and regulated, you'd be able to go to the store, instead of buying crocodile, there's a good chance that the people who ended up taking that would have never graduated from pain pills. A lot of people don't know that either, that sometimes the progression goes, people end up taking pain pills because they injured their back or something like that, and then people don't realize that's synthetic morphine and synthetic heroin, and it affects the same receptors in your brain. It's like a small dose of that, and what happens is people go from that, then they go to heroin, and then, if they're out of heroin and there's crocodile available or some other crazy fucking stupid derivative, they'll take that. But if the fucking pain pills were legal to begin with, maybe they would have never graduated from pain pills. And when it's legal, what can you do? You can have strict guidelines and you can have education that tells people, look, here's the way that this drug works. Here are all the negative effects of it. Here's the dose you should take if you're this weight. Notice, like with alcohol, for example, sure, there's some people, plenty of people who get alcohol poisoning and who ruin their life with it, right? But most people are pretty fucking good drinkers. They're moderate drinkers and they can live a normal life. Well, it would be no different with any other drugs if we had the same environment for those drugs, where it was legal, taxed, and regulated. If people knew their limits, their opiate limits, look, I know the way, let's party tonight, let's have some fun. I know the deal, man. I can only take 1.5 Vicodin, and if I take any more than that, it gets in my head and I get crazy. That can happen. We can live in that world. We should live in a world where all drugs are legal, taxed, and regulated. And then the worst drugs, they wouldn't even be around. Crystal meth. Did you know this about crystal meth? It's basically a cheap attempt to get like a cocaine high. Again, people don't know this stuff because they gotta educate themselves on drugs. Crystal methamphetamine. It's an amphetamine. It's a big-time upper. You know what else is an amphetamine? Adderall. The legal pills that kids are taking for ADHD. That's a very similar drug in how it reacts with the brain to cocaine and methamphetamine and all that other stuff. It's an uppity, kind of dopamine rush high. Well, if you had a system where people could go to CVS and buy the fucking Adderall pills, and you legalize it, tax it, and regulate it, you wouldn't have to have the crystal meth market underground because people wouldn't want to buy the crystal meth because they'd lose their fucking teeth. Why would they do that when they could go buy a bottle of Adderall and pop 2 Adderall? See, the situation, it's never as simple as ban it and it's gone. Like, that's how people think. Like, oh, drugs are bad, so ban them and they'll go away. How'd that work during Prohibition? They banned alcohol and what happened? The mafia started selling the alcohol. People were drinking just as much as they were before, if not more, and the alcohol was less safe. And you made the mafia incredibly powerful and gave them a lot of money and a monopoly in a gigantic market. So there were nothing but downsides when you banned alcohol. Why do you think it'd be any different if you ban drugs? It's going to be the same thing, and it is the same thing. We spent over $1 trillion trying to eradicate drugs, and there's more drugs now than there was before. And 60,000 people or more have died on the southern border in an actual war, a hot war, a drug war. So you have people dying, more people taking drugs, and we blew over $1 trillion. Why would you continue down this road? It doesn't make any goddamn sense. And reading this story about synthetic marijuana is further proof of that. If you legalize regular marijuana, chances are the synthetic marijuana industry would disappear. Or if you legalize it all, maybe you could actually come up with some sort of a synthetic marijuana that doesn't get people sick. That would be possible only under a system where we can do testing because it's legal, taxed, and regulated.